Today we're going to walk through deploying and configuring the AWS Storage Gateway virtual appliance for the purpose of using it as a repository for Zerto's long-term retention. The Storage Gateway is an on-premises appliance, either physical or virtual, that basically provides a front-end caching solution which ultimately transmits data for longer-term retention to Amazon S3. The Storage Gateway is offered in three different ways: a file gateway, a volume gateway, and a tape gateway. For the purposes of Zerto LTR, we are referring to and working with the file gateway. Starting with Zerto 8.0, the AWS Storage Gateway is officially supported. So how does it work? When using the file-based service, the Storage Gateway integrates with and provides low latency access to LTR data through transparent local caching, while also managing data transfer to and from Amazon S3. Transmission of the data can take place over public endpoints, a direct connect, or VPC. Additionally, the gateway optimizes and streams data in parallel and includes management of bandwidth consumption. The virtual appliance is available for VMware ESXi, Microsoft Hyper-V 2012 R2 or 2016, and Linux KVM. For the purposes of this demo, we will be focusing on and deploying for VMware ESXi. Before we start, let's take a look at the workflow we'll be following. The deployment process takes place in both the AWS Management Console and the on-premises vSphere environment, and we are going to be switching between the two throughout. In AWS, we will start the file gateway creation process and download the OVF template that we will then deploy to vSphere. We will need at least one S3 bucket to be created. However, that can be created at any time as long as it exists before we get to configuring the file shares in step 3. We will then activate the gateway, configure the file shares, and then finally add repositories in Zerto and configure our VPGs for long-term retention. Alright, let's get started. Here's my AWS Management Console. Now the first thing I want to do under Services is type in Storage Gateway and select it from the list, which will then take us to the Storage Gateway deployment page. We're going to click Get Started. And we see file gateway is already selected, so we'll just click next. And my environment being VMware ESXi or vSphere, I'll click download image and I'll save the OVF file to a location where I can deploy from. And through the magic of editing, the file is already downloaded. And what I'll do now is open up my vCenter client and deploy the OVF. While the wizard here is fairly straightforward, after you've chosen your cluster, host, or resource pool, verify that the disk format is thick provision lazy zeroed and that you have selected the proper destination network. Once you've done all that, click Finish and the appliance will be deployed. Now that we've deployed the virtual appliance, before we power it on, we're going to edit the VM settings. We're going to add a new SCSI controller and then also add a 150 gigabyte cache disk. One thing to note here, if you look at SCSI controller 0, it's VMware paravirtualized. However, if you do set that for your new SCSI controller and put the disk on it, AWS will not recognize it and you will get stuck. So set it to LSI Logic SAS. And then add a new hard disk afterwards. With that new hard disk, you're going to set the size to 150 gigabytes. And then we're going to make sure that we assign that disk to the new LSI Logic SAS controller. So expand the setting there for the hard disk. And at the bottom, choose New Controller. And then select the correct one. Click OK. Alright, once that completes, we can then now power the appliance on. Alright, once I've powered on the appliance, I'm going to launch the remote console. There's one thing I got to do in here, which is verify connectivity. So as soon as it boots up, I'm just going to log in with the admin credentials. You can get the default password from the AWS documentation. It's probably really easy to guess, but we're going to choose option 3 to test the connectivity. And public, because I want to use the public endpoint, and I'm going to type in the name of my region to verify that I can connect to it. We can exit out of that. And now we're going to switch back to the storage gateway deployment page where we left off and click next. Again, choose the public endpoint, which is what we tested. Plug in the IP address for the appliance on premises, and then click connect to gateway. Just copying the name here because I'm going to need it on this next step. So I'm going to make sure that I've chosen the correct time zone of the appliance. I'm going to plug that name in there, and then I'm going to add a key value or key name of name and value of the server name so I can identify it. There's our disk that we created. It's already allocated to cache, so let's just go click configure logging. This next step is optional. You can create a new log group or disable it altogether. If you have VMware HA enabled, you can verify it at this time. I'm clicking exit because I do not. So now the gateway is created. The next step I'm going to take is to create a file share, which is going to be our NFS share. I didn't create the bucket ahead of time, so I'm going to jump over to S3 and create a new bucket. Name it appropriately so you can identify it easily. Choose your region. I left all the defaults here. I'm going to create the bucket and copy the name again. And we'll just paste that name into the bucket name. Make sure NFS is selected. Make sure the correct gateway is selected. And then we're going to add a key of name and put the bucket name in there as well so we can identify it. I'm just going to select all the defaults here. All right, so this part's important. The NFS client, allowed clients area, you're going to make sure you only add the IP addresses for the on-premises Zerto Virtual Manager and all the VRAs that will be talking to this. If you don't edit and lock down the allowed clients, you can see there the default is 0000/0. That means anybody can get to it, so be sure to protect that. So now I've created the share. Go back into the management console, click on the share and get the details where it says on Microsoft Windows. We're going to copy that entire path because that's what we need to create the repository in Zerto. Jump over to Zerto, go to Setup, click on the Repositories tab, and then click on New Repository. Give it a name that's easy to identify. For storage type, select Network Share. Make sure NFS is selected as the connection type. Paste in that path. And if it's your only repository, click Set as Default Repository. All right, there we go. We got a successful mount. So I'm going to go to my VPGs. I've already got one created here, so I'm just going to edit the VPG. Jump over to long-term retention and turn it on. Make any necessary changes here to match your required retention summary, whether you're doing dailies, weeklies, monthlies, or yearlies, or a combination. And then when you're done, click Next or click Done, and it'll save the virtual protection group. Right, so there we go. We'll just wait for this VPG to update. As soon as it's done updating, we'll head over to long-term retention on the left navigation bar. Select our VPG that's configured for it. And under Actions, since I don't want to wait until 3 a.m., we'll run it now. This is just to verify that we are getting connectivity to the storage appliance online or the gateway appliance. So right now it's running. Wait for it to complete. There we go. All right, now let's test restoration. Quickly jumping over to monitoring, I can see my last retention process that ran was completed, which happened after the manual run that I did. And now I've got 2 restore points. Real quick, I want to jump into S3, and I'm curious to see what's here, right? I want to see if data is being written at all. So I can see there's a folder structure, and it looks like there are some data files beneath that folder structure related to the backup. Jumping into vSphere, I've got a demo machine right there that's running. I'm not going to do anything with it. I'm going to actually restore a copy of it. So one thing to note here, a couple things, is if you're going to do this in production and you have a machine running that you're testing a restoration on, make sure that, one, when you restore it, you're not powering it on automatically, so you then can make changes to move it into another environment. And 2, you do have the option through the restoration process in Zerto to select the network for it. So if you do want to bring it up in the same environment, just be sure to put it into an isolated network. Otherwise, you will disrupt production and cause a bigger problem. So we'll kick that restore job off, and you can see the VM's already registered here. And then again, through the magic of editing, speed that up. And now we can power the VM on, open the console, log on to it, and validate that it has indeed been restored. Now at this point, once you validated everything is restored, you can either leave it there, do what you want to do with it, or recover files, do some testing. But just make sure again that if you're doing this in a production environment, that you are putting it on an isolated network. Right, there we go. I've got to log into my very light Windows installation. Now that I'm done, I don't need this anymore, so I'll just power it off and delete it from disk, because this was just a demo. Now that you've got your NFS share for your LTR repository, if you want to turn on indexing for any of those systems in there so you can quickly search and recover files from LTR, we're going to configure that from the gateway. First thing we're going to need to do though is join the domain with the gateway so we can leverage SMB, which is the only supported method for indexing. Go to the storage gateway, select it, go to actions, and edit the SMB settings. From here, make the settings accordingly to match your environment. I did this for the sake of the demo. Put your fully qualified domain name in here, your domain user, username and password. Organizational unit and domain controllers are optional, especially if you've statically assigned the IP address on the on-premises appliance to point at your domain controllers for DNS. Click join. Once it's successful, you can close this window out. And one thing I want to throw out there is that I've pre-created the cache disk on premises. So if you haven't done that, you'll need to do that at this point. But once you've done that, you'll see it show up here. Just make sure cache is selected. And then now we're going to go and create the S3 bucket for the indexing repository. Make sure you select the correct region and then create the bucket. We're going to copy that name like we did for the NFS share. And now we're going to create the file share. All right, plug in the name of the bucket here. Choose SMB. Make sure you have the correct gateway selected. And now you have a chance to enable logging, audit logs specifically for the SMB share, which would come in handy so you can verify who has access, who's trying to access it, things like that. Give it a friendly name. And then again, like we did with the NFS share, I'm just going to accept the defaults here. On this next screen, if you need to, because this is Active Directory based and you're using a specific user to access the file share, you might not need to do anything here, but do check with your security team or your standards in your environment, and update appropriately. So now we've got our gateway here. We see 2 file shares. I'm going to jump over to file shares. This one is still updating, but while it's updating, the path has already been created. So at the bottom of the page here, just select that entire path there. And we're going to use that when we mount to the SMB repository. All right, now it's available, so we can move forward. Let's go into Zerto. Under Setup, Repositories, click New Repository. Put the friendly name in here for your repository. Network share, SMB is the connection type, that username and password that has access to it, and then the path. Save that, and we've got a repository. Now we're going to jump into what we call the hamburger settings or hamburger menu in Zerto, which is on the top right corner for the site settings. Go into site settings, click on LTR settings, and select that new repository you just created. Just note that only SMB repositories will be selectable from here. All right, so that's done. We're going to jump back into our VPG, the same one we've been testing with here. We're going to edit the VPG, jump over to long-term retention, and we're going to enable indexing for this server by clicking on the VM settings button and selecting file system indexing on that VM and saving it. And then we're going to save this VPG. So what we'll see now here is, since we've turned on indexing and saved the VPG, is that an indexing job will run on this VPG. And then once that completes, we'll be able to test it. All right, so that job completed. We can see in the monitoring that the job was successful. So what we're going to do now is restore through search and restore. Select the VM, and I'm just going to type the name of a file or a folder. In this case, Windows. We can see that the system has been indexed, and now anything containing Windows in the name will show up, and we can recover. And there you have it, setting up the AWS storage gateway for NFS and SMB LTR repositories with Zerto. Thanks for watching.